Can you describe like your very first, the first person, the first friend, and are you still friends with that person? Like, do you keep in touch, I should say? I'm sure you consider them still a friend, but
I have not talked to the first person in a long time, although I'm sure I could hit him up today and rekindle that conversation. But he was the founder of that website, billypenn.com. And I reached out to him because I said, I see you have this Who's Next list. And they had a Who's Next bash where they were going to bring all these people together. And I said, I'm interested in buying tickets to your event because I want to talk to all these people for this thing, but I figured I should invite you as well. And we had lunch at Cozy, a little like restaurant in Philly, Center City. And I just remember from that meeting, of course, I remember some of the things we talked about, but the thing that stuck out to me most was him being like, oh, what are you, like 1,000, 2,000 people into this so far? And I was like, no, you're the first, you're very first person of the project. So yeah, I think he thankfully
you were good at what you were doing already.
Yeah, thankfully he didn't know I was just starting. So, but that became part of it. The second guy that I met was really interesting. He's an artist, and I started to Google Philadelphia artists because I loved art. I didn't work in that scene, and I kind of wanted a way to be connected to it. And it took me to a site in liquid.com, and that lists a bunch of Philly artists. So I just looked at the ones whose art I found interesting, and I sent them emails. And I met this guy, and he was talking about this. He was like adapting a Russian play or something into artwork, like a book of art.
Oh,
And
wow.
It was called Tales of the Buffoon. And it was his life's work that he was doing. And I love it because he's literally just about to finish it 10 years later. And I know how much work has gone into my project during that time. So I know how much work has gone into his book in that time. And I just looked him up on Instagram because I don't even think he had an Instagram at the time. Otherwise, I would have been following him. But he posted like, "Hey, I'm getting ready to launch this." So
Oh, wow.
I said, "Hey, like when I pitched him in the beginning, as my network grows, yours will grow with it, and hopefully I can share what you're working on." So I'll be happy when he's done with that to post it to my Instagram and whatnot and say, "Hey, here it is."
Yeah, I'm looking for that. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. 10 years of just doing, like following through.
Yeah, and I'll share.
And this the subject matter sounds fascinating too. Like just like he's taking something that like we get bombarded with so much American stuff and like the tropes and all these things I love whenever foreign film or something reaches me and I'm like, that's weird. I like how other people look, like the reason we meet people essentially, how everybody else looks at things.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll share. The meeting him was sort of I've arrived moment to. Like the NFL, they have like, what's your welcome to the NFL moment? It was kind of my welcome to meeting other people and hearing their stories moment because he's an artist. And I said, it'd be cool to meet you where you do your art. And he said, well, my studio is on the 3rd floor of my house in South Philly. So if you want to come meet me there, we can meet there. So I traveled to this stranger's house. He opened up the door and he said, are you a serial killer? And I said, no, are you? And he said, no. Okay, cool. You want some water? So he got me a glass of water. And and I went to his studio and he was telling me about his art and how at a certain period of his life it went through a dark time because he said he was like, one day we were sitting in the living room with my dad and my dad was sitting in his armchair and he got up and he went into the other room and he shot and killed himself with a shotgun.
Jeez.
And
that would affect you.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of crazy things now to where I'm prepared to hear something like that, but that was a very jarring moment for me.
Right.
Literally second person into the project to be like, hey, people have real things going on in their lives. People. Yeah. So it was a lesson right from the start.
That is, I haven't run into we have had interesting conversations here where we're laughing at a joke and then all of a sudden it's dark.
Sure.
And we have to remember these are real people. Like when she says she got stabbed, there might be a funny angle to it, but she's a real person, and the person who did it's a real person. And
right,
that was a learning lesson that we had as well. Like when you talk to people, there's more to what they're saying than necessary than the moment that they're describing.
Sure.
So be a little careful, be prepared for it. Be kind when it hits you. and be ready for something like that to hit you at any moment.
Definitely.
What are some of the other lessons perhaps you learned when interviewing people, like you from person 1 or 2, where you're already good at it? You've been complimented on person 1. What are some of the lessons that you learned or that you carry with you from 1,000, person 2,000, so on, like the big block moments?
Well, I would say the biggest thing I've learned is no one really knows what they're doing with their lives. Everyone's just doing the best they can with the resources that they have. And I think when you can acknowledge that everyone else has uncertainties and has insecurities, it just puts you at a place of understanding other people. And one of the ways that I don't really care if people open up to me or not. It's not my intent to like dive into the deepest parts of their life. I'm happy to
Fair
talk
enough.
about the Eagles for 45 minutes if they want. To me, it's just about sharing the time together. That being said, it is always nice when you can get into those deeper moments. And I think for me, the strategy is just not not caring one way or the other. And I think
Just to
when
be
people,
present.
yeah, and when people realize like, oh, he's not trying to get anything out of me, then they open up. It's almost
Yeah, yeah.
backwards in a way, but they'll take me there on their own because they realize, oh, okay, here's actually a genuine ear who wants to listen to me, and he doesn't want to use this information in any way. He's just curious. So then they almost come to me and they spill their story out. It's like their cup is overflowing and they're just waiting for someone to hear it.
Yeah, at
So
the end, they're like, I thought you're really going to dive in on how I might be insecure about my nose, and you're like,
sure,
no, what? Like, because this one time when I was a kid, and then you have a story.
yeah,
As soon as you get that comfort, you get a person.
or yeah,
You
and
get the
there's
person before, but you get to see another aspect of them. I think whenever you earn or not earn, but when you get the trust.
yeah, and if someone tells me something wild about their lives, obviously the mind will go to, oh, I want to know more about that. I want it, but I will restrain myself from asking anything more, and then I'll let them tell me or not. And I think that's been a useful technique. Another thing is vulnerability breeds vulnerability. So sometimes I'll just share about myself first and then leave the door open for them to join me on that level of
Sure. Yeah.
openness or not. Um, but the way that I get to know people is I think about their lives like a timeline, and I'm just trying to fill out that timeline to the best of my knowledge because we all have a childhood, an adolescence, adulthood, a future, and I now in my keynotes I talk about this friend framework, and it stands for family and relationships. The I is industry, like education into career. The E is entertainment, and the ND is needs and dreams.
Right.
So if you think about it, like we all have a family that evolves from our childhood into our adulthood. Some of us have parents that are divorced. Some of us have parents that are deceased. Some of us have parents that are together. It doesn't matter. We still all have a family dynamic that has an impact on who we are emotionally.
Right.
And we all have an education story. Some of us dropped out ninth grade. Some of us got our PhDs. But we all have some education story and then something that we do to pay the bills. And like I will think and watch people's lives as they talk to me. And it helps too if this conversation is starting to stall. I can be like, oh, I really don't know what they were like when they were a teenager. So let me dive into that piece of their lives. Or we talked about work and education and their family and stuff, but I don't know what they do for fun. So let me dive into that piece of their lives. So it's just having that genuine curiosity
Yeah.
that is driving the conversations.
Yeah, I actually when I give a relationship advice, and often there's questions like, how do I meet people, or we're going on a first date, what do I talk about? I'm like, talk about the other person, ask them everything you'd
Yeah.
want to know about them. Like you're going on a date to learn about them, ask
Uh-huh.
those questions. Like, what do you dream in black and white? Do you whatever it's about, whatever you look around the room and go, do you like salt and pepper on chicken? Like, how
Yeah.
do you like to cook things? It can evolve. Just be open to learning. Like, what do you want to know? Think about it before you go on a date with them. What you'd love to know about them, and just let that take you. Make it
Yeah.
natural. Don't have a list. You can't have a list. Even though I have a list right in front of me. My
Yeah.
next question for you, by the way, is now.
Yeah.
Actually, I did. This is something that because we have rules for who we want to talk with. I was wondering, do you have rules for the people that you meet with now that like maybe you've had at the beginning or had to develop over time after? I'm not trying to dive into bad experiences, but do you have rules like that usually doesn't work out for me? I try to avoid stuff like this.
No. And I can't point to a bad experience from the project,
Wow.
which is great. I'm thankful to be able
That's
to say
amazing.
that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
part of it
We
is my
haven't either, to be fair. We've had a fantastic guests throughout. We've only had a couple prank callers. We'll probably get one today.
okay.
But in general, yeah, I've been fortunate. The saying "people are good" actually applies, and I'm glad to hear that. But continue. I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah, no, you're good. I mean, I've had conversations that are difficult where people give me one-word answers the entire time, and I'm sure you've seen that as well. And um, like they won't ask me a question the entire time, and then it's, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to carry us through for this 60 minutes. So that's difficult. But I've also met people, those people who come to me and they say, I struggle with social anxiety, and I thought this would be a really good way for me to push my comfort zone. And then in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, now I'm actually really proud of you for
Yeah,
showing up and even just giving one-word answers because
for
I know
trying.
that's requiring it. Yeah, and so and I want this to be a positive experience for you, so you go out and do it again in the future. But my only rule is that I don't already know people. So,
Okay,
because for me, the whole purpose of this journey is to get
sure.
to know new people. So if I'm, because a lot of people ask, oh, did you start with your family and friends in the beginning and then just went from there? I think a misconception is people think that I'm trying to share people's stories. Like I'm meeting people to get their story to
And
share
then
it.
you make I make my living off of vampiring your story, but no, I've read your Instagrams, and I don't yeah, no, you're not doing that. You're actually taking the time to know people.
Yeah, I want to get to know people and I'll share their story as a byproduct. Like the story is still part of it, but my interest is getting to know people so that the next time I see them, they're my friend and not a stranger to me.
That's so when with the rules thing, and we'll get off this, I promise.
Sure.
You agreed to do our show. I'm sure you get asked to be on a lot of podcasts. You've been on the Today Show, which we're going to dive into a little bit. Do you have places you won't go? Or, how about this? How do you select the? I don't want to go to the negative. How do you select the places that you can have time for, like this show? Why would you give me a yes?
Why would I give you a yes? Because you asked me to,
Ah,
and I have the time to do it. And yeah, I think if you're interested in my story, then I'm happy to have a platform to share what I'm working on.
well, I'm glad
And
you're here.
yeah, and I know what it's like to ask people to be part of something that you're working towards, and
It's
so there's a kinship in that. But um, I think if I'm sometimes if I get overwhelmed with things, like if I've got like 5 people that want to do podcasts in the same week or something, that's the crazy thing. I still want to do it with all of them, and then the other part of me will get exhausted and not do a good job of following up with it. So you did a
I've
good job of following up too. And so uh, I think the only things I wouldn't do is stuff where that don't have like good intent behind them, if that makes sense. And I can't point to a
I know
specific
exactly what you're talking about.
example of that, but like I live in the wholesome side of the internet, and I don't really care to be in the sensational side of the internet.
Have a great one. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Be safe out there. Treat each other well. See ya.